The Galactic Concordance Feast was the kind of event that turned even the most seasoned diplomats into nervous wrecks. On paper, it was a celebration of unity, each species presenting its most treasured culinary tradition in a grand gesture of cultural exchange. In practice, it was a minefield. The issue wasn't the food itself, though many dishes did have a tendency to squirm, glow, or explode. It was the unwritten rule: you eat what you're served, no matter what. To refuse a dish was an unforgivable insult, one that could easily derail centuries of careful diplomacy. Jeff Carter, humanity's sole representative at the Concordance, sat at the edge of the banquet table, eyeing the array of alien dishes with a mix of curiosity and caution. He wasn't nervous. Compared to Earth's chili cook-offs and dubious gas station burritos, this was just another Tuesday. He adjusted the sash marking him as the ambassador of Earth wrinkled slightly because, despite Raylos's nagging, he'd stuffed it into his carry-on and smiled as he scanned the glittering hall of luminescence. The chamber was as alien as its guests' walls, made of prismatic crystal reflected shifting rainbows, and delicate strands of glowing fibers stretched across the ceiling like a web spun by a particularly artistic spider. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy floated, slithered, and shuffled toward an impossibly long banquet table. The air was thick with an eclectic blend of alien scents: floral, metallic, and something Jeff could only describe as burnt rubber with a hint of despair. Ambassador Carter chirped a familiar voice. Jeff turned to see his aide, Raylos, fluttering toward him. The wiry avian from the Slivar species looked more ruffled than usual, his feathers rippling in agitated waves. Raylos. "Look at this spread," Jeff said, gesturing broadly to the table. "It's like a sci-fi cooking show exploded." Ambassador Raylos began, his tone tight with barely concealed panic. "I've reviewed the menu for tonight, and I strongly recommend caution. Some of these dishes are not meant for beings like you." Jeff smirked. "I'm sure I'll manage. What's on the do not eat or you die list?" Raylos sighed, his crest rising. "The Zorvax delegation, specifically their Chartal," he paused, as if the name alone should have triggered fear. "Let me guess," Jeff said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "It's spicy." "No," Ambassador Raylos replied, his feathers fluffing defensively. "It's fatal. The Zorvax thrive on consuming toxins. Their biology has adapted to process venom and corrosive substances that would melt most beings on contact. The Chartal is steeped in enough poison to kill an entire conference hall." "Yikes," Jeff nodded thoughtfully. "So medium rare." Raylos groaned, his feathers puffing like a stressed-out feather duster. "This is not a joke. The Zorvax take immense pride in their cuisine. They see it as a test of resilience. Even hinting that a non-Zorvax might try it would be Relax," Jeff said, patting Raylos's wing reassuringly. "I'm not here to insult anyone. I'll steer clear of the murder stew." The feast began with great ceremony. One by one, delegations from across the galaxy introduced their dishes with elaborate speeches. The Scivar, a gelatinous species that communicated through color pulses, presented their slime-burst surprise. The dish shimmered like molten glass, its bioluminescent hues shifting in time with the Scivar ambassador's speech. Jeff caught a whiff of ammonia and decided to avoid asking what the surprise was. Next came the Vorngarth, a towering insectoid species who unveiled flame-core fronds. The fronds were essentially molten rock, sizzling ominously on the platter. The ambassador explained at length that they were harvested from the collapsing cores of dying stars. Jeff's stomach growled as he stared at the burning pile. "Definitely charbroiled," he muttered. And then it was the Zorvax delegation's turn. The room fell silent as Kralix, the Zorvax ambassador, rose from his seat. Tall and imposing, with emerald scales and a tail that flicked with reptilian precision, Kralix carried a domed platter to the center of the table. The moment he lifted the lid, an acrid plume of steam billowed out, causing nearby delegates to gag or instinctively recoil. "Behold the Chartal," Kralix announced, his deep voice reverberating through the chamber. The dish was menacing. A dark, bubbling mound of viscous sludge, it hissed faintly, emitting a pungent aroma that stung Jeff's eyes even from a distance. Flecks of glowing green danced across its surface, as if to taunt anyone foolish enough to approach. This dish, Kralix continued, is the ultimate expression of Zorvak's resilience. Steeped in the venom of the Skirak viper and tempered with the ash of the Toxian bloom, it is a meal only the strongest may endure. To consume it is to prove one's worth. Jeff couldn't help but notice the smug glint in Kralix's eyes. It was clear he didn't want anyone outside the Zorvaks to even consider trying it. This wasn't just a dish, it was a statement. Ambassador Carter Rallos hissed, tugging at Jeff's sleeve. "Do not even think about it." Jeff stood up. "Ambassador Kralix," he said, his voice cutting through the tense silence, "I'd be honored to try your char tal." The room erupted into gasps, clicks, and a few audible screeches. "You can't be serious," Rallos squawked, flapping in alarm. "Jeff, this is suicide." Kralix turned to face Jeff, his slitted pupils narrowing. "The char tal is not for the faint of heart, human. Even the strongest beings in this galaxy would perish from a single bite." Jeff grinned, rolling up his sleeves. "Lucky for me, humans are stubborn. Pass me a fork." The Hall of Luminescence fell into a stunned silence as Jeff Carter strode toward the center of the banquet table. Delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their various appendages trembling in a universal display of apprehension. Kralix watched Jeff approach with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. The Zorvak's ambassador's tail flicked lazily, as if he were already savoring the spectacle of Jeff's imminent demise. Ambassador Carter Kralix said, his voice dripping with feigned concern, "I would hate for humanity's first contribution to the Galactic Council to end in tragedy. Are you absolutely certain you wish to attempt this?" "Absolutely," Jeff replied, grabbing the fork with a confidence that bordered on reckless. "I've had worse. One time I ate a burrito from a gas station on I-95. If I can survive that, I can survive this." Kralix blinked. "What is a burrito?" Jeff grinned. "A testament to human ingenuity and questionable life choices." The Zorvak's ambassador gestured grandly to the bubbling mound of char tal. "Very well, it is your funeral. Not if it tastes good." Jeff speared a chunk of the char tal with his fork. Up close, it was even more intimidating, dark, viscous, and radiating a faint heat that made his lips tingle before it even reached his mouth. He lifted the morsel to his lips, the entire room holding its collective breath. Rallos was not holding his breath. In fact, he was flapping frantically, feathers puffed like an avian cloud of despair. "Jeff, please don't do this. We can still salvage diplomacy if you back out now." Jeff popped the bite into his mouth. The effect was immediate. His tongue felt like it had been hit by a flamethrower. A wave of molten heat surged through his sinuses, making his eyes water and his brain scream in protest. His throat burned as if he'd swallowed a live coal, and for a moment he was certain his taste buds were staging a violent revolt. Jeff's vision blurred, the room swimming in distorted colors. For a fleeting second, he wondered if this was how the Zorvaks saw the world, through a haze of pain and venom. And then it was over. The fire receded as quickly as it had come, leaving behind a complex, smoky aftertaste that lingered on his tongue. He blinked, took a deep breath, and looked around. "Huh," Jeff said, his voice hoarse but steady. "That's spicy. Not bad, though." The hall erupted into chaos. "He's still alive," a Rotnishian delegate shrieked, their gelatinous form quivering. "Impossible," a Vorngarth ambassador chittered, their mandibles clicking furiously. "He should have combusted." Kralix's tail slammed against the floor, his confident smirk dissolving into stunned disbelief. "What sorcery is this?" he hissed, staring at Jeff as though he'd just witnessed a meteor reverse course. "You ate it." "Yup," Jeff replied, grabbing a nearby glass of water and downing it in one gulp. "Got any milk, though? My tongue feels like it just ran a marathon." "Milk," Kralix repeated, his voice laced with incredulity. "Yeah," Jeff said, leaning casually against the table. "We humans use it to cool the burn. Counteracts the spice." Kralix blinked slowly. "Counteracts the you are unholy human." As word of Jeff's survival spread, delegates from across the room began to crowd closer, their disbelief giving way to curiosity. Ambassador Carter asked a Savar delegate, their gelatinous form pulsing in shifting shades of green. Do all humans possess this fortitude? Well, Jeff replied, scratching the back of his neck, not all of us. But some of us are into spicy food. Back home, we've got things like ghost peppers, Carolina Reapers, and this stuff called hot sauce. It's kind of a cultural thing. A cultural thing, a Texalian delegate inquired, their 8 spindly legs twitching. Yeah, Jeff said, warming to the topic. We have competitions to see who can eat the spiciest stuff without tapping out. There's even this place called Inferno Joe's that serves a sauce so hot, they make you sign a waiver before eating it. The Gorlaxian ambassador recoiled, their eye stalks retracting in horror. You willingly consume poisons for recreation. Sure, Jeff said with a shrug. It's fun. Builds character. The Rotnisian delegate turned an alarming shade of neon yellow. Humans are insane. Jeff grinned. We prefer innovative. Meanwhile, Kralix stood frozen, his claws digging into the table as he processed what had just happened. Jeff's survival wasn't just unexpected, it was an insult. The Chartal was more than a dish, it was a symbol of Zorvak superiority, a testament to their unmatched resilience. For a human to endure it casually, no less was unthinkable. You mock us, Kralix growled, his slitted eyes narrowing dangerously. You cannot truly have consumed the Chartal without consequence. You must be a mutant. An aberration. Jeff chuckled. Maybe, but I'm still standing. You've got to admit, Kralix, it's a good dish. Smoky with a nice heat. A little intense on the first bite, but nothing a good glass of milk won't fix. Milk, Kralix spat, as though the word itself was an affront to his dignity. Jeff leaned forward, his grin widening. Hey, you should try ghost peppers sometime. They're kind of like your Chartal, but smaller, and less murdery. Kralix's tail lashed furiously, but before he could respond, the Savar delegate stepped forward, their colors flickering with excitement. Ambassador Carter, they said, might I present you with our dish? The slime burst surprise. Jeff turned to the shimmering plate of gelatinous goo. Why not? I've already come this far. Jeff Rallows whispered urgently, tugging at his sleeve, please stop before they kill you. Or worse, offer you dessert. Jeff speared the wobbling blob with his fork. Relax, Rallos. What's the worst that could happen? The hall buzzed with activity as Jeff's audacious culinary adventure continued. Delegates lined up to offer him samples of their most challenging dishes, each one more bizarre and intimidating than the last. By the time the feast ended, Jeff had not only survived the Chartal, but also consumed a wriggling worm dish, a plate of molten rock, and a dessert that glowed so brightly it required protective eyewear. When Jeff finally returned to his quarters, Rallos was waiting, his feathers frazzled and his expression somewhere between awe and despair. Jeff Rallos said, his voice trembling, you do realize what you've done, don't you? Sure, Jeff replied, flopping onto his bed with a satisfied sigh. Bridged some cultural gaps, ate some good food, maybe earned us a little galactic respect. Rallos buried his face in his wings. You've started a war. A culinary war. The Zorvaks will never forgive this. Jeff grinned, his eyelids already drooping. Then I guess we'll have to win it. One bite at a time. And with that, he drifted off to sleep, dreaming of ghost peppers and galactic glory. The fallout from Jeff's daring feast was immediate and far-reaching. By morning, the Galactic Concordance Hall was abuzz with whispers, rumors, and wild speculation. Some delegates were impressed, viewing Jeff's resilience as proof of humanity's adaptability. Others were horrified, regarding him as a reckless anomaly who had thrown diplomacy into chaos. None, however, were as outraged as Kralix. When Jeff strolled into the main chamber the next day, he was met with a scene straight out of a sci-fi courtroom drama. Delegates crowded the central podium, their voices rising in a cacophony of disbelief. At the center of it all stood Kralix, his emerald scales glinting under the crystalline lights, his expression a mask of simmering fury. Ambassador Carter Kralix said, his tone icy but deliberate, your actions last night demand an explanation. Jeff grinned, adjusting his sash. Sure, which part? The eating, the surviving, or the part where I asked for milk? A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Kralix's tail lashed against the floor, the sound echoing like a whip crack. "Do not feign ignorance," human Kralix growled. "You have insulted Zorvak's tradition. The char tal is more than a dish, it is a sacred trial, a testament to our species' strength. Your survival diminishes its significance and mocks our heritage." Jeff's grin faltered slightly. He glanced at Rallos, who was perched nervously on a nearby bench, his feathers rippling with apprehension. "This wasn't about mockery," Kralix Jeff said, his tone measured. "I thought it was about respect. You shared something important to your culture, and I honored it the best way I knew how, by participating. Isn't that the point of the feast?" Kralix's slit pupils narrowed. "Your survival is a fluke, an anomaly. I do not believe that a human and untested, frail species could endure the char tal without deceit or trickery." Jeff bristled. "Frailty? That's a bit harsh. Have you seen Earth's obstacle courses? We do mud runs for fun." Enough, Kralix snapped, his tail slamming into the floor again. "If you wish to prove your species' supposed fortitude, then let us settle this properly." He stepped forward, his claws gleaming. "A char tal duel." The room fell into stunned silence. Rallos nearly toppled off his perch, squawking in alarm. "Jeff, do not agree to this. A duel is their most extreme cultural challenge. It's meant to break even the strongest of them." Jeff crossed his arms, meeting Kralix's glare head-on. "What exactly is a char tal duel?" Kralix's grin was sharp and predatory. Two contestants face escalating rounds of char tal, each dish more potent than the last. The victor is the one who remains conscious or alive longest. Rallos flapped frantically. "Say no, Jeff. Say no right now." Jeff raised a hand, silencing his panicked aide. He studied Kralix for a moment, then nodded. "Challenge accepted," he said, his voice calm and steady. The room erupted into chaos. The duel was scheduled for that evening, giving the Concordance Hall staff just enough time to convert the main chamber into an arena. Word spread rapidly, drawing spectators from nearby systems who arrived in droves to witness what was quickly being called the most absurd diplomatic event in galactic history. By the time Jeff entered the arena, the atmosphere was electric. Delegates packed the viewing tiers, their murmurs blending into a steady hum of anticipation. At the center of the room sat two tables, each bearing a steaming platter of char tal. Kralix was already at his table, his posture rigid and his expression unreadable. Jeff sauntered up to his own table, waving to the crowd like a sports star entering the field. "Ambassador Carter," boomed the announcer, a Rotnishian delegate whose gelatinous form shimmered with excitement, "and Ambassador Kralix will now engage in a contest of resilience. The rules are simple. Each round, they will consume a portion of char tal, crafted with progressively deadlier ingredients. The contest continues until one participant forfeits or falls." Rallos flapped down to Jeff's side, his feathers puffed in full panic mode. "Jeff, this is madness. You don't have to do this. Just apologize. Grovel if you have to." "Relax," Rallos Jeff said, adjusting his jacket. "I've got this." Rallos's feathers drooped. Do you really?" Jeff grinned, holding up a small carton of milk. "Secret weapon." Rallos groaned. "We're doomed." The first round began with what the Zorvaks considered a mild version of char tal. Mild, of course, was relative. It was still steeped in venom extracted from the Skirek viper and garnished with powdered Toxian bloom ash. Jeff and Kralix each took a bite, the crowd holding its collective breath. Kralix chewed with practiced ease, his expression impassive. Jeff's face flushed as the heat hit him, but he remained composed, giving a casual thumbs up as he downed a sip of milk. "Not bad," Jeff said, his voice slightly hoarse. "Tastes a bit like Earth barbecue sauce. Spicy, but doable." Kralix's eyes narrowed. The second round was served a bubbling mass of char tal infused with Toxian bloom resin, a substance so volatile it was stored in vacuum-sealed containers. Both contestants ate without hesitation. Jeff coughed slightly, his eyes watering. Kind of smoky, he said, grabbing his milk. Nice charred flavor. Got a bit of a kick, though. Kralix growled under his breath but said nothing. By the fourth round, the air around the contestants had grown thick with acrid fumes. The chartal now glowed faintly, each bite a molten, bubbling mass of venom, ash, and increasingly exotic toxins. Jeff's face was drenched in sweat, his breathing labored, but he kept going, forcing himself to chew and swallow each bite. Kralix, too, was showing signs of strain. His claws trembled faintly as he lifted his fork, and a sheen of sweat glistened on his scaled brow. The crowd roared with each successive round, their excitement building to a fever pitch. The final round was announced with great fanfare. The dish was a masterpiece of culinary destruction, chartal infused with Skirak viper essence, crystallized toxian bloom, and a secret Zorvax ingredient known only as the Black Fire. It arrived on the table in a container lined with reinforced alloy, and even the servers wore protective gloves as they presented it. Kralix stared at the dish, his confidence visibly faltering. Jeff, though clearly suffering, leaned forward, his grin defiant. "Ready for this, Kralix?" he rasped. Kralix growled but said nothing. Both contestants lifted their forks, the crowd holding its collective breath. Jeff bit down, his vision swimming as his entire body felt like it had been set on fire. The heat was unbearable, his tongue numb and his thoughts blurring into a hazy roar. But when he looked over, Kralix was swaying, his eyes unfocused. "You good over there?" Jeff croaked, his voice hoarse. Kralix groaned, then slumped forward onto the table, unconscious. The arena erupted into cheers. When Jeff staggered back to his quarters, victorious but barely standing, Rallos was waiting with a look of pure exasperation. "You're a madman," Rallos declared. "A madman with an iron stomach and zero self-preservation instincts." Jeff collapsed onto his bed with a weary grin. Madman or legend? Rallos sighed, shaking his head. Both. Definitely both. The morning after the chartal duel, the galactic concordance was quiet, eerily so. Word of the spectacle had spread far and wide, with every sentient species in the galaxy now aware of what had transpired. The Zorvax had been defeated in their own sacred trial, and by a human no less. Jeff Carter woke up feeling as though his body had spent the night being sandblasted from the inside out. His tongue was still tingling, his stomach gurgled ominously, and he wasn't entirely sure his eyebrows had grown back after the heat blast of the final dish. But he was alive, and more importantly, he'd won. Rallos, his ever-nervous aide, stood at the edge of the room, clutching a datapad with shaking claws. Jeff Rallos began, his tone a mix of awe and exasperation. "Do you know what you've done?" Jeff sat up slowly, groaning as he stretched. "Yeah, I won a duel, made some friends. Maybe proved that humans can handle a little heat." A little Rallos squawked, his feathers fluffing out. "Jeff, you consumed enough poison last night to vaporize a star whale. Twice. And the galaxy is talking about it. The Zorvax are humiliated. The other species are unsettled. There's even talk of making human spice tolerance a formal diplomatic category." Jeff grinned despite the lingering ache in his chest. "Sounds like we're finally making an impression." "An impression?" Rallos flapped his wings in frustration. "Kralix is demanding an audience with you, right now. He's either going to challenge you to another duel or declare war on Earth." Jeff groaned, rubbing his temples. "Great. Breakfast and a political showdown. Let's get it over with." The meeting was held in the Concordance Hall, under the watchful eyes of the Galactic Council. Kralix stood at the center, his emerald scales gleaming and his expression unreadable. Despite his loss the night before, his posture was regal, his tail coiled tightly around his legs. Jeff entered with his usual casual confidence. Though his walk was slightly slower than normal, his stomach was still recovering, after all. "Kralix," Jeff said with a polite nod. "Good to see you up and about. That last round was a killer, huh?" Kralix's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he gestured for Jeff to join him in the center of the room. "You have humiliated me," Kralix said, his voice low and steady, but with a sharp edge. You have humiliated the Zorvax. Our chartal is a sacred symbol of our endurance, our superiority. And yet, you a human consumed it with what seemed like ease. Ease is a strong word, Jeff admitted, rubbing his stomach. I'm pretty sure my insides are still on fire. Kralix's tail flicked in irritation. This was not merely a duel. It was a test of cultural pride, and we have failed. Do you understand what this means for the Zorvax? Jeff hesitated, suddenly aware that this moment was far more delicate than he'd anticipated. Kralix, I never meant to insult your people. I just wanted to connect. Eating together is one of the ways humans bond. Sharing food is how we show respect. The room fell silent, the delegates leaning forward as they watched the exchange. Kralix's eyes narrowed. You call this respect? Jeff nodded. I do. Your chartal isn't just food. It's a story about how your species has thrived against all odds. By eating it, I got to experience a piece of that story. And let me tell you, it was one heck of a ride. For a moment, Kralix said nothing, his gaze fixed on Jeff. Then, to the shock of everyone present, the Zorvax ambassador's lips curled into a faint smile. You are either the most foolish creature in the galaxy or the most sincere, Kralix said, his tone softening. Perhaps both. I'll take that as a compliment, Jeff said with a grin. Kralix inclined his head. You have proven your resilience, human, and in doing so, you have forced us to reconsider our assumptions. Perhaps this is the beginning of a new understanding between our peoples. The hall erupted into applause, the delegates clapping, clicking, or vibrating in their species' respective manners of approval. The aftermath of the duel brought unexpected opportunities. The Zorvax, humbled but intrigued by humanity's resilience, began formal talks of cultural exchange with Earth. Kralix personally invited Jeff to visit Zorvax Prime, where he promised to share the secrets of their cuisine and maybe even learn a thing or two about Earth spices in return. Jeff, ever the opportunist, pitched the idea of a galactic chili cook-off, which was met with surprising enthusiasm. By the time Jeff returned to his quarters that evening, he was exhausted but satisfied. Ralos fluttered in behind him, his feathers unusually calm. You actually pulled it off, Ralos said, his voice tinged with disbelief. You turned a potential disaster into a diplomatic breakthrough. Jeff collapsed onto his bed with a groan. Told you I had it under control. Ralos shook his head, a small smile breaking through his usual anxiety. You're lucky you're so ridiculous, Jeff. Somehow it works. Jeff chuckled, his eyelids already drooping. Ridiculous or not, I think we've got ourselves a seat at the table. And next time, I'm bringing hot sauce. As he drifted off to sleep, the galaxy itself seemed a little brighter, though that might have just been the lingering effects of the chartal.